And now we receive Erik Volt, who is a political analyst and published author, to dialogue about Julian Assange's case and the latest events regarding his legal process. Welcome, Erik, and thank you for your time and presence here with us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Okay, Erik, so after the President's events on Monday, when Judge Bratzer ruled that Assange will not be extradited to the US, there was many hopes and expectations on today's hearing. Under your considerations, what could have been the circumstances and elements that led to this contradictory decision from the same judge?
I think today's ruling was extremely disappointing, the fact that he was not given bail. On the other hand, I do think that the decision not to extradite Julian Assange is a major victory for the global movement that has worked to prevent extradition, that has worked in favor of human rights, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and the freedom to receive accurate information. Obviously, it's not a complete victory, far from it, and it's not a victory for the rule of law and respect for human rights in the UK particularly, and the West in general, because the ruling was based on strictly humanitarian grounds and the judge did not accept any of the arguments that were put forward to show that the extradition would be an attack, a blatant attack on freedom of speech and freedom of information. So Western democracies and the UK, the rule of law in the UK, are not winners in this case, but the global movement of normal activists, grassroots activists, experts, brave independent journalists, current and former heads of state, human rights activists, UN experts, etc., that have stood up against extradition. There's no doubt that they have won a major victory, because probably what's happened is that for the UK authorities, it would just be too embarrassing to send Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, to the US. And they found that basing this decision on humanitarian grounds would be less embarrassing for the US government and create less friction between the US and the UK government. So they decided to base the decision on those grounds.
So do you believe that this decision is half pleasant, to please maybe the US with the second decision and to please the UK with the first decision?
Yeah, that's not a far-fetched hypothesis.
So this new decision over the Assange's case marks over a decade of this case, and also maybe the criminalization of journalistic activities. How the resolution of the case, this new decision and all that could bring, affects maybe journalism and also maybe the perception of what journalistic activities could be, on your perception, of course.
Yeah, of course. If you'd permit me to take a step back and on general terms view this from above, sort of. I mean, WikiLeaks has made two major sets of revelations. The obvious one has been that it's revealed the true nature of how the US seeks to maintain world hegemony through hard and soft power, including war crimes, overthrowing democratically elected governments, through military coups and other forms of meddling against other countries, in many cases in clear breach of international and national law. The second revelation is that WikiLeaks has made are the limits to Western democracy, human rights, freedom of the press, and freedom of information. Not so much through the concrete leaks, the leaked documents, but through the ferocious persecution to which WikiLeaks has been subject. And really the absence of any loyalty to the principles of human rights and freedom of speech from European states who have this whole time failed to protect Julian Assange from persecution, in spite of very clear criticism and very clear demands from UN experts, such as the Special Rapporteur on Torture, Nils Melzer, and the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention. So even if Julian Assange is set free tomorrow, which he should be, or today, there is still the very chilling example of how his life has been destroyed during 10 years for the mere fact that he has published true information of public interests. And so really what we're seeing is that in Europe, there is, as long as you publish things that the governments tolerate, there is freedom of expression, there's freedom of speech. But as soon as you publish something that is deemed to be too dangerous for the powers that be, particularly in the US, then you run the risk of losing your liberty and having your life basically destroyed, as has happened with Julian Assange, which is really, really a tragic example for Europe. And it's also very revealing that the states that have offered asylum to Julian Assange during this period have been mostly Latin American countries, whereas European countries have stayed silent or even actively participated in the persecution of WikiLeaks and of Julian Assange, and in general against whistleblowers. I mean, there used to be a time when political refugees from Chile, from Argentina, fleeing from Latin American military dictatorships would go to Europe and find a safe haven from persecution there. And now it's the other way around. You have Western-based whistleblowers and publishers like Julian Assange, and they get asylum. They have to apply for asylum, or they have offered asylum from Latin American states. So it's the world upside down, and it's of course very disappointing for those of us who somehow believe in Western democracy.
I think, Erik, that maybe the so-called democracy and the so-called freedom of speech only serves the power. In this case, I think Assange case demonstrates that.
I wouldn't go as far as that, but definitely the Assange case shows that there are very severe limits to freedom of speech and freedom of information in Western democracies. And also, what is extremely worrisome in this case is the precedence that has been created, because when the US gives itself the power to extradite and punish people who have no real connection to the US, Julian Assange is an Australian citizen. He was based in Iceland for some time, and mostly in European countries, and he has hardly set foot in the US. And so he's extradited. The US is basically using their legislation extraterritorially to limit freedom of expression, to limit the freedom of press in any other countries, because what Julian Assange is accused of publishing, his crimes, are absolutely no different from the publication of the very same cables by many Western Western mainstream media outlets who have published those very same outlets. So there's really, if this precedent is created, then it means that no journalist is safe from persecution anywhere as soon as any foreign government with the power to do so demands to have a journalist extradited and punished for the so-called crime of revealing the truth about abuse of power from states and governments.
Indeed, Erik. So we thank you for your opinions, your criteria, and all you share with us here in From the South.